Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today at this edition of the Leadership Roundtable on reimagining business with AI-enabled SaaS solutions on Google Cloud. My name is Satish Raman. I serve as Chief Strategy Officer at Fractal.ai, and I will be your moderator today. Before we start, I just wanted to mention that this webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand on the Fractal website at www.fractal.ai. Attendees are currently in a listen-only mode. If you have any questions during the webinar, please do send a message via the Q&A box on your screen, wherever they may appear at the bottom or at the top, and we will address them during the Q&A session at that time frame. In terms of the agenda, after we're done with the introductions, the panel will discuss topics for about 40 minutes, and we want to leave about 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A towards the end of it, depending on the volume of questions that we have. So without further ado, I will welcome very warmly my fellow panelists and co-speakers today, starting with Nirav Sheth, who's Director, ISV Marketplace and Partner Sales at Google Cloud. Nirav is an executive in Google Cloud's North American sales organization and is focused on accelerating Google Cloud's market momentum by scaling businesses via partnerships of all types. His team is responsible for powerful customer outcomes through partners and ISVs across their largest sales region in North America. Nirav joined Google from Cisco, where he held roles across product development, transitioning later into professional services, and spending time leading Cisco's customer experience organizations as well. Joining Nirav is Brian Hartwell, VP of Worldwide Partner Sales at Snowflake. Brian is a Silicon Valley veteran who has helped build and lead sales teams for some of the world's most accomplished technology companies, and serves currently as VP of Worldwide Partner Sales at Snowflake. Brian recently worked as VP Worldwide Channel Sales at OpsRamp, where he developed, executed, and accelerated worldwide sales routes to market and go-to-market revenue expansion pathways with Google Cloud, AWS, Microsoft Azure, and other technology alliance partners. Joining Nirav and Brian is Tami Kelly, who's the Chief Growth Officer of Crux Intelligence. Tami recently joined Crux as Chief Growth Officer, where she's responsible for managing hands-on growth of the company, including sales, marketing, public relations, partnerships, and global go-to-market strategy. Over the last 20 plus years, Tami has been responsible for optimizing product offerings, defining GTM strategies, scaling operations, and developing industry partnerships to drive business growth and revenue across a variety of organizations, both large and small. Most recently, Tami led global enablement platform rollout at Analect, the data and technology arm of the Omnicom Group, putting their marketing and insights platform into the hands of over 20,000 users across 250 brands in 92 countries, all of that in a span of just 2 years. And finally, joining Nirav, Brian, Tami, and myself is Jordan Sher, VP Marketing of OpsRamp. Jordan has over 20 years of experience in startup and emerging technology, enterprise-related B2B marketing, IT infrastructure, operations, and artificial intelligence. At OpsRamp, Jordan is responsible for brand development and positioning in the roles that he currently serves at. Most recently, prior to that, Jordan was Vice President, Head of Marketing for Stack Infrastructure, a hyperscale data center operator based in Denver with over 1 gigawatt of capacity in North American markets, where he built the brand, product marketing, communications, demand generation, and partner enablement programs. Again, welcome, fellow panelists, and look forward to a robust discussion today. Before we get started on the specific questions and the topics, one of the things that I wanted to touch upon a little about, given the context of what's transpired in the last 18 months, was how you are viewing and what you've witnessed by way of how AI-based SaaS solutions have helped both governments as well as enterprises remain relevant in business and continue growing, and how they've aided and assisted businesses. I did want to share a couple of examples of what we've been seeing, one from the government side and one from the commercial side. With what happened during the pandemic, especially the early part of the pandemic, one of the most noticeable trends that we witnessed was the breakdown of supply chain organizations or supply chain functions, if you will, within different companies. One example that I can give is of a large consumer packaged goods manufacturer who had a very robust supply chain coming out of China and Southeast Asia. But owing to the clampdowns and the lack of mobility of goods from those regions, found that their second line of supply chain coming from Africa and South America were severely crippled for lack of being able to predict accurately as to how much of quantity they needed actually imported from those regions to meet their production schedules. So the part of that, by bringing together a bunch of demand planning, forecasting, pricing and promotion, and supply chain solutions, we were able to spin up a solution that was cloud-based, in which they were able to accurately predict what was the volume of inventory they needed on an upstream basis to meet their production schedules for really fast-moving goods, a lot of which, kind of pretty much ran off the shelves, if you will, during the pandemic. And that to us was a turnaround of literally about a week to 10 days before we were able to put this in place for them to take advantage of the second line of supply chain. That was interesting for us, and a problem that we were able to solve and subsequently take to different clients as well. There was a more interesting one on the government side and from a public service standpoint as well, where we were approached by two state governments to help them better manage and monitor, the spread of COVID, if you will, as also have a good control and governance over the spread of the disease in those respective states. And the problem that they were facing was, multivariate data and multiple types of data sources. So that's census data on one side, tax data on one side, records of hospitalization, availability of beds, combining that with, available cell phone related location data, drone data, and satellite images. We were able to spin up a harmonized data platform, again, on the cloud. And this we actually managed to do in about 2 to 3 days for those respective state governments to be able to effectively track, monitor, and manage, the outbreak of COVID, and to, provide very timely help in both curbing and curtailing the spread of the disease, and also monitoring exactly where help was needed, from the healthcare system. So I know these are, two examples that are a little poles apart, but both of them had a foundation in bringing AI solutions to bear on the cloud that we were able to spin up at pretty fast pace to meet those demands. I wanted to kick that off and, get your perspectives and what you've seen and witnessed, in similar or other cases. And Nirav, I'll probably start with you, and then we can go over to Brian from there.
Yeah, thanks, Satish, and great insights and great overview. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. So a couple of things I kind of think about, right? Macro view, not even kind of referencing kind of what we're seeing from a Google point of view. If you look at kind of McKinsey, McKinsey is suggesting that executives that have invested in AI-related solutions are almost unilaterally seeing some kind of revenue growth and positive impact from those investments. And 54% of those same executives that are making those investments are seeing some kind of bottom line cost savings as well. If you flip over and you take a look at some of the Gartner research that they conducted earlier this year, they kind of evaluated and they looked at in 2018, approximately 14% of CIOs had some kind of investment strategy around AI/ML. That increased to approximately 19% in 2020. In 2021, that is projected to be 24%, and you can kind of continue to project out, what the incremental opportunity is, right? And so I think what has happened really is, with what the world has been experiencing over the past 12, 18, 24 months, has really prioritized and accelerated the digital transformation, digital acceleration journey that our customers have been on. Now, you cited a lot of examples. If I stick with kind of the supply chain example, I would, maybe provide a bit of a corollary to that, which is really around retailers that we would work with, right? Retailers had to very quickly kind of pivot to being able to deliver an omni-channel experience to their end customers, right? And so to be able to deliver an omni-channel experience to their end customers, there's a lot of front-end work that is required in terms of how can they engage with their customers in terms of the digital experience, app-based ordering, curbside pickup, et cetera, et cetera. But I think very, importantly, just like what you laid out, those retailers have to think about, okay, what is now our demand forecasting? We had good projections when all of our stores are open, but now if X percentage of our business has shifted, to online and probably in more of a permanent trend, that completely disrupts our forecasting, that completely disrupts, what we're communicating to our suppliers and our vendors. And so we've done a lot of work on the back end, leveraging our AI, ML, and analytics solutions to really arm those retailers to really have more effective partnerships with their providers and vendors so that they can continue to serve their customers no matter how their customers are choosing to be served. And while I won't take any names specifically of retailers, but several of the retailers that we work with are hitting all-time highs despite all the pain and all of the challenges that the world has been experiencing. When I say all-time highs in terms of all-time highs in terms of revenue, right? If you flip over and you think about, kind of what's happening in public sector space, certainly we've worked with different customers, maybe from a smart cities perspective. We've been working with, let's say, the city of Memphis, leveraging our cloud AI platform and cloud AI solutions so that they can quickly identify where do they have infrastructure issues across their road infrastructure. And we're working with clean energy providers like AES, where they can take advantage of our Vision AI solutions to drive more intelligence around maintenance of their wind turbines, around their kind of installations and whatnot. And so I think what I'd say, Satish, is what maybe several years ago would have been a very technology-centric discussion has firmly pivoted to much more of a business outcome, and how can customers leverage the power of the platform, the power of the capabilities that Google and my counterparts around the line will be able to speak to. How can they leverage that for true compelling business outcomes in some way, shape, or form, and ultimately help them drive a transformative way in which they can serve their customers as well as their internal constituents.
Got it. Nirav, that was super helpful, and I think you hit it on the head of technology being a business enabler and it featuring front and center in any business outcome or business problem and related solution related effort within enterprises, as opposed to it being only in the CTO or the CIO's organization, as it may have well been, a few years ago, but definitely not in the last 18 months and not on a go-forward basis. But thanks for sharing that. Brian, would love to get your points of view on this as well.
No, I appreciate it, Satish, and thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to sit among many former colleagues and many new friends in the network. So thank you all. And certainly we are all living through some pretty extraordinary times. I will say, data science is the future of analytics. And as it relates to AI, ML capability, you have to have good data, and you have to have seamless access points to that data. And what we're seeing, and I think what the pandemic has certainly amplified, is the recognition and acknowledgement that your internal data is the gold, but equally, if not sometimes more important, access to third-party data in building these models becomes incredibly important. And those examples as it relates to COVID data, weather data, supply chains, et cetera, data scientists need easy access entry points to access and run models against a larger set of purified data. And that's where we've seen tremendous excitement with customers, with data scientists. And I think that's really what's driving the next wave in software development.
Got it. That's very helpful context, Brian. In fact, I remember for a similar use case around non-availability of data, we did spin out, a bunch of GANs to look at synthetic data from aiding and enabling some of the decision making But yeah, definitely appreciate the point around not just data, but the volume of data, but more importantly, the quality of data that help towards impacting these decisions. Jordan, I'm sure with your focus on the marketplace and your set of clients, there are a few interesting insights that you'd love to share with us as well.
Yeah, and thank you very much, Satish. Thanks very much for the panel. It's an honor to be able to participate in this with all of you. But a couple of themes have arisen in the two previous demonstrations that I think apply to us. We're in the business of infrastructure management. In a hybrid multi-cloud world, that infrastructure produces more data than ever, to parrot on what Hart is talking about. And there is a greater focus on business outcomes than ever before, to talk about what Satish is, or what Nirav has mentioned in the past. The COVID pandemic accelerated and spotlighted these two trends dramatically. And so we have seen increased demand for use cases involved with ingesting that data and creating proactive IT operations management in the face of that. And also the latest trend in enabling technology to be a driver of business and to accelerate revenue generation and to create enhanced business outcomes. More so than ever before, as everybody's moving to remote work, as new use cases for specifically Google Cloud, or other cloud providers have also accelerated in the past year. There are new challenges for infrastructure management teams and infrastructure operators. So in this case, AIOps, artificial intelligence for IT operations, has really provided new horizons to drive business value. Ingesting alerts, allowing these IT teams to look for patterns in that data that help them to be more proactive in addressing issues before they happen. Two particular use cases that have arisen for us in the past year, most notably in the manufacturing space and in the financial services space. Both of these spaces are driven to produce in light of business disruption. So we are actively avoiding business disruption, and both are dealing with very low latency environments. So in the case of financial services with high frequency trading and other low latency activities, but also in manufacturing, we can't disrupt the production line. We can't disrupt the supply chain. So we have seen clients come to us to implement AIOps, artificial intelligence solutions, to allow those teams to be more proactive and address disruptions before they happen, to minimize those potential threats to their business and keep the lights on, regardless of where the infrastructure is coming from or how it is managed. Location doesn't matter anymore. And the ability for IT teams to drive business value is more important than ever. So that's what we've been seeing.
Got it, Jordan. A lot of that resonates with some of what we're seeing on the, how we define AI IoT from a predictive maintenance and preventive maintenance standpoint as well in some of the large heavy engineering and high intensity energy utilities and gas farms as well, especially when the flow of people that would otherwise go through a refinery or a production system was severely curbed owing to the pandemic, but they still needed to make sure that not only were the lights just on, but there wouldn't be any hiccup that would cause them to stop working. So yeah, certainly relate with that completely. And from a completely different perspective, Tami, in the context of Crux being a decision co-pilot to CXOs, to managers, to frontline leaders as well, what are some of the insights that you picked up over the last 18 months?
Yeah, thanks, Satish, and thank you again, fellow panelists. Nice to be here with you today. Interesting to hear you all talk about examples, particularly you, Satish, where AI and ML were leveraged to solve some real live business challenges, right, during the COVID time. I would say because of the nature of our product, Crux being an AI-based learning engine, focusing on diagnostic, descriptive, predictive analytics, the world really wasn't ready for the pandemic. And a lot of organizations really came came to the understanding that they weren't, and you know, if they survived, kind of made it through, you know, the other end of the tunnel here, right? I think you know, it's really they're understanding that they need to change, you know, some business behaviors, technology that they're utilizing, so that they can be ready for the next. And I don't mean next pandemic specifically, right? But you know, that large scale sort of changing customer behavior that organizations need to react to quickly. And so largely over the last several months, like that's what we've really been talking to our clients and prospects about. You know, so whether it's specific to capturing analysis around disease data to predict outbreak areas, or better managing inventory to mobilize resources, whether that's you know, hospital beds or cleaning equipment, right? Or, you know, AI ML really gives organizations the ability to, you know, pivot and adapt quickly to changing needs to the people we each serve as organizations. And if organizations weren't able to pivot and react quickly, you know, they have quickly learned and are ready to implement solutions that will allow them to build out a strategy and future-proof their businesses moving forward.
Got it, Tami. I think that's helpful. And if anything, the last 18 months have shown, along with the quality of decision making, which, you know, one often makes with more imperfect data than perfect data. It's about the speed of the decision making and the availability of information at your fingertips, and people getting comfortable with making decisions with only 60-70% data, as opposed to waiting till it got to 80 or 90% that put them in a zone of comfort, just, you know, based on heuristics or how they have, you know, broadly taken decisions in the past. So yeah, I definitely appreciate those insights from the four of you. Nirav, if I may just focus, you know, and point towards you with one question, right? I mean, we've been hearing a lot about democratization of AI, you know, driving adoption among enterprises, and the use of AI-based, you know, solutions, whether it's SaaS or products. How is Google Cloud helping in putting this whole rubric together of democratizing AI, helping enterprises, and taking these AI-based SaaS solutions, you know, towards that goal of both democratizing and, you know, enabling enterprises to become, you know, faster and nimbler and, you know, make better quality decisions?
Yeah, thanks, Satish. So let me maybe add a couple more examples in terms of, you know, how we're working with entities out there to kind of, you know, speed outcomes to market, right? And this is probably a topic near and dear to all of our hearts, right? And so, you know, while we talked a little bit about retailers, we talked about supply chain, we talked about clean energy, et cetera, maybe a little bit more closer to home for all of us. You know, obviously Google partnered very, you know, closely with a number of healthcare providers and those players in the, you know, HCLS space to really help them accelerate, you know, their time to market for therapeutics, right? You know, by providing the right kind of analytics, AI, and research platforms so that those HCLS providers can really get kind of the insights that they needed. You know, on the flip of that, we also worked with different state entities. An example would be the state of Illinois, right? If you look at kind of when things really started to come to the forefront, you know, between the March and May, you know, kind of timeframe last year, states like the state of Illinois, they saw an uptick of 11x in terms of, you know, individuals, their citizens having to file unemployment claims. And so how do you really accommodate that? Well, we worked very closely with the state of Illinois and rolled out our contact center AI solution with Virtual Agent Desktop so that, you know, citizens can basically get into, you know, a scenario where they can get access to answers and insights and data faster, and ultimately enable the state of Illinois to process those claims faster despite, you know, the spike of claims, right? And so, again, I think that, you know, from a Google perspective, we were working very closely with all kinds of companies and all kinds of, you know, even public sector entities around the world to really partner with them and provide them with kind of the AI tool sets so that they can serve their constituents, whoever their constituents might be, whether it's a citizen of their state, of their country, whether it's a customer, you know, better, faster, et cetera, et cetera. Now, you know, even before kind of talking about Google Cloud, if you look at Google holistically, we've been on a journey for many, many years to democratize very powerful capabilities and make it available to end consumers, right? We're the only ones in the industry that have 9 services where we serve more than 1 billion monthly active users. So services such as search, you know, maps, photos, so forth and so on. And if you think about it, the ability for us to have effectivity in those services, it takes an immense amount of AI, ML, and analytic skill sets. Now, we might not consume it and think about AI, but all of these amazing features and capabilities that are in these services that we use day in and day out are ultimately AI, ML powered. And so one way, from a Google perspective, we've been democratizing AI, ML capabilities for many, many years. But what we've done more recently is we've taken all that smartness, right, of the platform, and the fact that we've got all this intelligence that we've built serving consumers around the world, and we've made it available via our Google Cloud platform. Now, in some instances, via that Google Cloud platform, those capabilities are just embedded in what our customers are experiencing, right? And so if a customer is taking advantage of some of our security solutions, the efficacy of those security solutions, it's really embedded AI in some way, shape, or form, or the efficacy of the security ISVs we might be working with. But in other instances, what we really want to do is we want to empower our customers to build their own capabilities to really custom tailor the outcomes that they're seeking, right? And so more recently, we took all of the different kind of tool sets that we had, we put them together, and we launched something called Vertex AI. And Vertex AI really is a suite of different capabilities, like our Vision AI capabilities, or Contact Center AI capabilities, or Document AI capabilities, so forth and so on. And we've layered on an ML Ops suite so that our customers can manage all of that, right? And so ultimately, what does that mean? It means that a customer, can build a model faster, cheaper, scale it more broadly, and do it in a way where they don't necessarily need the same level of expertise, right? A lot of the data that we're seeing is, customers require, 80% less coding to kind of build the right kind of ML model that they might need to, quote unquote, kind of train their systems, right? And then the flip side of that is, how can we embrace those capabilities that are already out there, right? So if you think of, how we're integrated with TensorFlow, how we're integrated with PyTorch, it enables customers that are already familiar with other tool sets, to come on the journey with us much faster. And while I don't want to get into kind of speeds and feeds, right, the fact that we've got this kind of robust network around the world, ultimately what that means is that we can deliver much more in the way of faster inference all the way out to the edge when the customers train their models and they need to understand what's happening, right? And so there's so much to talk about that's been built by people way smarter than I. And so rather than me kind of elaborating on it, what I would point, the folks that are listening to the webinar to is we've got a great set of tutorials, learning, and other offers available for free as a part of a recent Applied ML Summit that we ran. So you can check out all the recordings of that Applied ML Summit, and ultimately you can consume a lot of the learning, knowledge, and trainings that are available for free to just explore and learn more, and kind of essentially take advantage of all this amazing scale that we've got and embed it and have your company, kind of benefit from all those capabilities that we've been building for many, many years. Thank you, Satish.
All right, thank you, Nirav. That was very insightful. So, would it be fair to say that the dawn of the citizen data scientist is actually upon us? We've been hearing about the citizen data scientist forever and ever, and with a view to helping people like me, as an example, to be able to code in a low-code, no-code environment. But with what Google is doing and other firms such as yours are doing, do you reckon that it's closer today than it was even a year ago?
Just a personal reference, my 18-year-old has been embedding some of these capabilities in a web platform that he's been creating. And so while my 18-year-old is definitely super smart, I think he would be at a different level right now than a PhD in data science, and thus, while that's anecdotal, I unequivocally think collectively the industry, and certainly with what we're doing with Vertex AI, we really want to empower everyone to be able to take advantage of these capabilities and help them really reimagine what they can do in terms of their business and the outcomes they can deliver to their constituents.
Got it. Thanks. That's helpful. There's still hope for people like me in that case. Brian, if I might turn to you, one of the key constituents, and probably the most important constituent, is all of our clients, our customers, right? And the whole notion around customer centricity and client centricity but more importantly, what is the kind of seamless experience they have, which actually, increases the NPS. So in the context of the work that you're doing at Snowflake and what you see in not just in the recent past, but how you see the future unfolding, can you share how enterprises are leveraging, AI-based SaaS solutions or the platform and the ecosystem that you built to enable and drive better customer experiences?
No, yes, and indeed, and I will say it gives me an incredible hope for the future, and I will take a step back and compliment my colleague Nirav, who is not only a consummate professional but a wonderful father and a humble dad. I will say, in my view, speaking in a macro view, I do believe we're on the brink of a renaissance, and I think Nirav's comments that his son who's graduating high school is already embedding some of this capability into side hustle projects and growing business it just provides an incredible opportunity and a very bright line for the future. So these are positive things that are happening globally. And I'll go back to the point that data science is the future of analytics. And in my experience talking to customers and partners across the globe, they're in the enterprise, they're looking to move from reactive dashboards, reporting, into using data to become more prescriptive and predictive. And that's essentially what data science enables. And I think you can look at Google directly on this note and express some of that excitement. And if you simply reference search terms and queries over the past 5 years, that space has just exploded. And I think that's a very telling sign. With this excitement and intent, I will say that the tools and frameworks needed to drive these outcomes is still a very nascent marketplace and very fragmented. And at Snowflake, one of our commitments is to remain and be truly agnostic. So as I've had conversations with enterprises across the globe and asking them simply, have you made a decision for a standardized framework for ML across the organization? The answer abundantly is no. And in that vein, we have to provide access points, platform provisioning that allows that freedom of choice and elasticity. And I think that's a critical point. Customers today are using Snowflake data science for all types of things that you would clearly imagine. Forecasting demand, managing risk, understanding their spend for advertising, essentially determining the full value of a customer. And I think one great example, and it's a visceral example that I'll share with the team. My family, we purchase all our groceries through Instacart. And in light of the pandemic, that has gone from kind of early adopter to it is a standard process for all of my friends, closest peers, neighbors, et cetera. In fact, I could not imagine my existence with a young family and not having the availability and the convenience of this incredibly disruptive platform. And if you're in Instacart and you go into the app and you navigate to your local grocery store and you are essentially looking to buy a stick of butter, and you go out and you're in your app, and essentially that app will tell you if that stick of butter is available and on the shelf, yes or no. Well, the reality is Instacart doesn't really know if that stick of butter is physically on the shelf or not. They are essentially running and predicting whether that stick of butter is on the shelf. And how are they doing that? And that is coming from ML capabilities derived from Snowflake. So essentially, they are scoring these items every 30 minutes across millions of line items. And I think probably today, that's probably closer to billions of items. So I use that as a great example of probably every person you meet today on the street has actually touched Snowflake and ML on a daily basis. And I think that's a very transformative common answer. So essentially, what we endeavor to provide is giving data scientists the ability to access relevant data in a seamless fashion and equally equip them with the ability to access third-party data to drive a larger sample with more accuracy and predictive nature. And that is essentially the data cloud story. And I think that is an area, as we see continued expansion in software development, individuals, teams, organizations that are able to put context to the data in ways that enriches the data, essentially unlocks that value of the data for what we all believe it to possess. And those organizations that tap into this are going to have a distinct competitive advantage moving forward. There is no alternative option. This is orders of magnitude. This is the difference between good and great. And I believe this phenomenon impacts every company on the face of the earth. And that is how prolific and profound this impact is. So these are truly exciting times. And in that vein, Snowflake is dedicated to working across partners in developing an ecosystem where we have the ability to share data, monetize new revenue streams for the data that we are collecting and sharing it with others situated. And that presents very unique opportunities for existing legacy models and truly dynamic disruptive models moving forward.
Got it, Brian. Thanks so much. I did hear what you mentioned about Instacart, and I would be remiss if I didn't share the comment that was made by a neighbor of mine here in Manhattan, where they said, if you want to really know what digital twinning is about, stand in a Whole Foods physical store and look at your Instacart app while you're in the store, and you will see how closely they know, or they're able to predict how much of, let's take a stick of butter in your example versus,
Indeed.
What was actually on the shelf. And I think that's a very, very powerful statement that you made, and the outcome, and that actually having been exhibited and being lived on a daily basis, and what the future holds in that regard. So thanks for sharing that, Brian. John, I just wanted to reflect a little bit on the point that you made about AI ops, and there's multiple terms being used, right? I mean, back in the day, it started with IT operations. It started with data center management. Even before that, remote infrastructure management. But in the context of the confluence of all things digital, whether it's IoT, whether it's legacy IT ops, or the new age AI ops that you're talking about. What do you reckon are some of the key challenges that enterprises are facing with digital operations? And how do you think AI can help solve those?
That's a great question. I think it's the consummate question. What are the challenges that get in the way of adoption of AI in the operational environment? And to us, we took a hard look at it, and it comes down to trust at this moment. I think in the future, once AI is further democratized, and my 6-year-old is working with AI models in the same way that Nirav's 18-year-old is working with AI models. It might be different. But today, everybody's worried, number one, are the insights that I'm getting from my operational environment true, the actionable insights? And then B, what do I do next with these insights? Because I still don't necessarily know if I trust them, and I don't necessarily know if they're actionable. For us, we took a look at, and it came down to the notion that the data in to the algorithms must be aware and properly processed and clean. And then we must provide a workflow after that ingestion, post artificial intelligence, algorithmic analysis, into a pattern of activities that the IT operator still has some control over, but still can automate to some degree. So in our world, we think about two different types of AIOps solutions. There are domain agnostic, and then there are domain centric. The domain agnostic solutions are the bolt-on AIOps tools that take a data lake or a data warehouse, apply AIOps to that data lake or data warehouse, and produce insights. We, on the other hand, are domain centric. The idea there is that we ingest that data first on the OpsRamp platform, and then provide an algorithmic intelligence on top of that data, so that the operators of the OpsRamp platform know that the data that is being produced and fed into this algorithm is unified. A little bit more trust in that data, as opposed to a bolt-on solution. And then the second piece of that is, once we get that algorithmic intelligence, and once we have those insights, and once we've done some co-occurrence modeling, we found the patterns and determined what alerts are actionable, we then provide what we call process automation, which is a level of control over the automated workflow. It's providing a run book, allowing someone to create their own custom script of automation on top of that AIOps. That still gives them a level of control, but still automates some of the routine tasks that are involved in incident remediation, or identification of a server that might be down, or some downstream issue that can be dealt with systematically, and might just involve like turning a server off and turning it back on again, something like that, that's relatively simple and automated. But by providing those 2 points of differentiation on the data in and the data out, we're trying to overcome some level of mistrust of the current AIOps marketplace and solution. Now we, like everybody here at this panel, we do see artificial intelligence as the future of, driving greater insights, doing all the great things that Nirav is talking about with use cases in healthcare and government. But at the same time, we recognize that we're in the middle of the transition. And so we want to provide some of those tools that help that transition along the way.
Got it. That's very helpful, John. Thanks for sharing those insights with us. And Tami, I think borrowing from insights and kind of extending that over in the form of a question to you, can you share some examples of how new age SaaS products are helping enterprises reduce the time to insight, improve the quality of key decisions being made, and the overall level of responsiveness? As is with everything about trust of data, trust in the process, but still having to make quick decisions. Would love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, there's a lot in that question, Satish, so thanks. At Crux, we talk a lot about the concepts of mobility and agility, how we build that into our platform, and how we offer those capabilities to our clients so they can service their own customers, right? So how, as it relates to mobility, we're talking about the importance of being able to move freely, work efficiently, adapt accordingly, right? Going back to your opening comments, Satish. Technology, particularly cloud technology, affords organizations the ability to do this with ease, right? So for any SaaS platform, particularly one like Crux, tasked with helping enterprises reduce their time to insight for key decision making, mobility has a profound impact on success. So being able to lean into a client's existing tech stack and connect to their established data repositories with partners like Snowflake and Google and others, ensures a reduced time to set up, enhanced security, most importantly, scalability, right? It was mentioned earlier, but, given the explosion of the amount of enterprise data today, I think it was IDC in 2020 estimated the amount of data created over the next 3 years will be more than the data created over the last 30. And so what we're talking about with that proliferation of data is it's just about sheer volume, right? It's impossible to think that an analyst or an IT community will be able to support that type of volume. It's not about talent or desire for the community to do so. It's a pure volume play, right? So organizations would essentially need an army of human capital to support it. And And so Crux, being on the forefront of AI technology, we anticipated that human capital, needed to assist in the augmented AI space in order to effectively use that data coming in. We built our solution on the cloud, knowing that we would need that technology to help our customers sort of scale quickly and at the appropriate time, right? For each individual organization to be able to, connect to these sort of fast growing data sets, harmonize them, monitor them continuously, stay ahead of the trends and identify anomalies, right? So, from an analytics perspective, organizations are able then, working on the cloud, to query multiple data sets at once, pull in relevant data to answer complex questions, complex queries, and reduce their time to insight rather, to seconds. One other thing I will say about mobility and agility is, there's mobility in sort of data and connecting into data sets and making sure things are accessible. And there's also mobility in the sense of, from a user perspective, right? So again, the rise of mobile workplace has been a long time coming. Like, I'm going to date myself here, but I spent the last 20 plus years commuting into Manhattan. And probably for the first 12-ish, 15 or so, we were all opening up our laptops on the train, right? Ferry, working on PowerPoints, sending or writing emails, to be sent when we got into the office and hooked up to Wi-Fi, right? That trend shifted, probably 10-ish years ago over to doing work on your mobile. And in the COVID era, that really, escalated, right? Warp speed, right? People intermingling work with personal responsibilities, right? So even though organizations now in certain regions are sort of having employees start to come back into the office, many, I think, will still allow for that distributed workplace situation, whether it's hours of the day, days of the week, right? So being able to have a SaaS mobile solution, delivering insights instantly into a user's hand is really important for any type of organization. And for as you can imagine, for an analytics platform like Crux, this affords our users the ability to make smarter, data-driven decisions wherever they may be, whenever they may need to access data to make a decision. So, by taking advantage of NLP, where users can literally, just ask a question into the phone the same way they would, their Alexa or into a Google search. It's simple, it's immediate. When you think about what that means for a business, think about how you use your mobile device on a personal level. You probably wake up in the morning, grab your device. Before you get out of bed, you've looked at alerts for your, missed calls, missed texts, YouTube videos, suggestions, email, whatever it might be. So, now how can we build in that same experience, but in a B2B sort of world, and say, okay, here's your alerts for your business. And imagine being able to sort of understand before you even get out of bed in the morning that you've got a shipment that is predicted to be delayed in its delivery to your retail partner, right? You can take that information and send it off to your distributor and kind of get the ball rolling and understand what the solution is and if they're aware, and getting basically an action plan in place all before you get out of bed. And that's really the power of like a SaaS-based AI solution on the cloud.
Got it. Tami, that was helpful. If I was to summarize that and ask the simple question, would it be fair to say that people would soon be saying, hey, Crux, tell me what's going on at work today when they get out of bed, the way they would say, okay, Google, what's the weather?
That's right.
There you go. Excellent. Thank you so much, Tami. And I definitely kind of hit home the point about enabling faster decisions, but with high quality, high trust, and with pretty near time rates of response responsiveness as well. We do have a few questions coming through. There was one that caught my attention, and Nirav, I'll kind of point it to you, given your earlier comments around working with retailers, but this presumably is more on the fashion retail side. And the question says, given the potential impact of AI and augmented reality in the retail industry, where do you see them going 10 years from now? So it's a little bit of crystal ball gazing, but why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I don't know if I can make a prediction 10 years out, because I don't think anybody could have predicted what would have happened in 2020, unfortunately, right? But I would kind of maybe just make a couple of just observations, right? And, for the audience, take it with a grain of salt, right? I'm not the, the retail global industry expert, right? By any means, but just a few thoughts from my perspective in terms of what I'm observing. I think number one, customers are definitely validating the behavioral shifts that have happened over the past 12 to 18 months are here to stay, right? I think unequivocally, we have pivoted much more towards an omni-channel kind of experience, and we've pivoted much more towards, essentially digital transactions and digital shopping experiences. I thought Brian's example on Instacart was a great one, as well as kind of, how you parallel that with kind of this whole concept of digital twinning, right? If you just walk in the store, you kind of compare. So I think those types of behavioral shifts and patterns, at least based on what I'm hearing from customers, are going to be here to stay, right? As you kind of take it a step further, whether it's customers we're working with, whether it's customers that others are working with, we are definitely starting to see kind of the evolution of augmented reality, right? So already there's a number of quote unquote smart mirror solutions that are available. If you go to certain online retailers right now, you can easily kind of visualize, what your room might look like if you were to purchase certain furniture, right? Or alternatively, what you might look like if you were to purchase a certain pair of glasses. And so I think what's happening is that there's a lot of these types of things that are now starting to come together that is going to completely transform what the experience looks like, for individuals, and ultimately retailers are going to have to kind of keep pace with those best-in-class capabilities, right? If retailer A offers a superb omni-channel shopping experience, retailer B that competes with them is going to be forced to do that. Then you're going to have others that come to the market to become an underpinning platform so that all retailers can offer, the same kind of experience. And that could be, let's say, for instance, our partnership with Shopify that we're very proud of, that's empowering small and medium businesses around the world to show up, as a very powerful retailer with an optimized supply chain, offering an omni-channel digital experience to their customers, right? And so, again, I don't know if I can necessarily speak to 10 years in advance, but I think if you just kind of look back to what has changed over the past 10 years, our habits and our patterns and our experiences are incredibly different. And candidly, where a lot of our share of wallet is going is also different now than it was 10 years ago. And I think I can just use that as kind of a reference point of what's going to continue to happen. And I think a lot of that kind of accelerated, over the past 18 months. Now, the other comment I kind of make is, this whole concept, I mean, you hit on it, the other presenters hit on it. I think, Brian really brought this to life with this concept of the data cloud. Ultimately, I think that's going to underpin how these retailers deliver those experiences, right? Every stream of data in some way, shape, or form is going to make that retailer, ultimately that customer, more efficient, more intelligent. It's going to help them differentiate. It's going to help them drive more top line. And more importantly, it's going to help them deliver a better outcome and experience to the consumer.
Got it. That's thanks for that, Nirav. I think that there is a whole host of changes, especially on the retail side, with not just AR, but other forms of it as well, or other forms of dash reality, if I can call it that. That is going to not just shape or reshape our entire consumption experience, but it's also just the way we're going to transact commercially, even for things that we otherwise wouldn't have just not thought twice about going even to the neighborhood deli or bodega to grab, which is now going to be available just based on an experiential shopping experience that you're able to have sitting right in your home. That is not that far away, and who knows what's going to happen in 10 years. But my own sense is, we're probably about 3-4 years away from seeing a fairly radical and seismic shift in terms of how people shop and consume in their homes. So thanks for sharing that. Brian, this question around data caught my attention as well. I'll try to paraphrase this question that I'm going to read out. It says, there are so many formats and data formats that are out there. Shouldn't there be a future app or an application that is conceived in a way that gathering all those forms of data in a specific entry point into the cloud be made simpler? Or in other words, orienting all those formats to a universal one. I thought this would be, straight up your alley. So would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I think it's a brilliant question. And I'll take a step back and just humbly share my experience and view. What the specific, if we peel back the layers, I think ultimately what we're speaking to is in terms of format, language, and frankly, the ability to iterate on those current technologies. Now, the challenge I think we've all come to realize working in this sector is that you have to be mindful that further iteration, innovation is the standard. And that is why Snowflake has created and has demonstrated commitment to a mission of remaining truly agnostic. Now, on this point specifically, as it relates to the data cloud, we have released what we call Snowpark. And this is a perfect example of the ability that we are opening up to data scientists around the world to essentially enter into and work and interface with the data cloud in any format or language of their choosing. And like personal preference, these standards apply in the data scientist realm. So ultimately, I think as opposed to the ideology that there is a single thread format that will be essentially a silver bullet into perpetuity, I think the mindset shift should be developing platform capabilities that are truly agnostic. And I think that's where the world is leaning. And I think the crowd has taken command with that offering. And that is something that we are very bullish on as an opportunity. And we have our ecosystem partners with accelerated views into this new operational standard and the ability to iterate and build on top of our platform. And that's where we're seeing even faster adoption and frankly, greater results. So I believe looking out over the horizon, the next 5 or 10 years, the next Snowflake or the next Google, the next Facebook will be applications born in the data cloud. And that is, I believe, the driving factor in this growth and expansion.
Thanks for that response, Brian. And I think I'm going to sneak in just one more question and back to you. And this has to do with healthcare specifically, and how AI and cloud can help on improving the quality of care for patients, either using telehealth, teleradiology, or for even in-hospital patients that are in beds. I thought that was an interesting, obviously a public safety type question, but also from the very existence of who we are and what we do, and the most paramount thing being our health. So just a few thoughts, which is about all the time that we'll have, and may well be our last question for today.
Yeah, so maybe just a couple quick thoughts, right? I mean, there's kind of one side of it is like that patient experience, right? And how can we kind of leverage different analytics and AI ML capabilities to improve the patient experience? Now, I don't want to, keep referencing kind of what's happened over the past year and a half, but I think, certainly what has happened over the past year and a half kind of brings, healthcare and kind of our experiences at the forefront. I can tell you when kind of things started to really get challenging, spring of last year. Not that we're away or out of the challenges completely yet, but there was a point in time where essentially patients couldn't see their families, right? And so, we, along with many others, right, worked very closely with healthcare providers to ensure that, that those patients, right, that might be, in ICU, might be critical, might be on ventilators, had the kind of, collaboration capabilities, which are underpinned by analytics and AI in some way, shape, or form, to communicate with their families and kind of see their loved ones and kind of have that warmth and comfort, and also for their family members to kind of experience that as well. I think if you take it a step further, there's a lot of data that seems to indicate and point to just a kind of a revolution of telemedicine. If I think of even my own family, I think of my parents. My dad would typically have to go and visit a clinic every 4 to 6 weeks. For the past 18 months, unless it was something serious, every visit has been over video, and that behavior is not going to change, right? But I think that's kind of more of the patient experience, right? And again, those experiences are going to be driven in some way, shape, or form by data and analytics. But I think the flip side is like what's happening underneath there. These providers, have much more in the way of research and insights because of the analytic capabilities, the data clouds, that Tami and Jordan and Brian kind of refer to, and that you refer to, that enables them to become, much more effective on, let's say, prognosis. If you think of pharmaceutical providers and, developers, the ability to speed therapeutics and different solutions to market because they now have more intelligent data. If you just even think about what happened from a vaccine perspective, while the testing start to finish might have taken a year to have something in market that, we could start to deliver with emergency use authorization. When I say we, I mean the government could start to deliver. The core kind of ingredients of that vaccine and what was going to be required, that was sorted out within, several weeks of sequencing the virus. And that's all only possible and made possible because of these amazing analytics and AI ML capabilities that are now available in the market that were never there before. If this was even 10 years ago, getting a vaccine to market could have taken 5 years. The fact that, we could start testing something, within less than 6 months, that's incredible. And that's ultimately what's going to get the world back on its feet. This is truly world-changing implications, with a complete and total top-down rethink of global health because of these capabilities that, all of us collectively are bringing to market.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that, Nirav. And I recognize that we're already a few minutes over time, but wanted to thank you, Nirav, Brian, Tami, and Jordan for spending the past hour with us. Certainly appreciate that. And, for sharing your time, your comments, your insights, along with me and the rest of the participants and the attendees today. Thank you so much. And to all of the attendees, thank you for taking the time today. If you could, on your way out, just fill out the brief survey that should be in the chat boxes in your respective instances of Zoom that you're dialing in from. That'll be certainly appreciated. And with that, we'll conclude the session. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.